dinner tonight, the wonderful dinner. And welcome to our Lenten service tonight. And as Pastor Ben would say, let us let the Spirit lead to whatever's going to happen tonight. So.
Jesus Christ, you are the light of the world. The light no darkness can overcome. Stay with us now, for it is evening, and the day is almost over. Let your light scatter the darkness, and shine within your people here. Joyous light of heavenly glory, loving glow of God's own face, you see creation's story, shine on every land and race. As evening falls around us, we shall raise our songs to you. God of daybreak, God of shadows, come and light our hearts anew. In the stars that grace the darkness, in the blazing sun of dawn, in the light of peace and wisdom, we can hear your quiet song. Love that fills the night with comfort, love that warms the weary soul, love that bursts all chains asunder, set us free and make us whole. You made the heavens splendor, every dancing star of light. Make us shine with gentle justice, let us each reflect your light. Mighty God of all creation, gentle Christ who lights our way, loving Spirit of salvation, lead us on to endless day. May God be with you all. Let us sing our thanks to God. Blessed are you, Creator of the universe. From old you have led your people by night and day. May the light of your Christ
When Pastor Ben asked me to share my faith journey with my church congregation, I began to really process what I wanted to share about my personal witness to faith's presence in my life. So in preparing any kind of delivery of words, it's always important to think first about audience. And I realized that my audience would be you, a church family that would hear what I had to say at those already surrounded by faith and by God. That became so easy. It was just to share my story and mix it with yours. We all have a faith journey that has brought us here week after week to celebrate our God and his presence in our lives. I realized the tough part for me and for all of us is to share our faith with a group of unbelievers, those in-between agnostics or those radical atheists. The whole idea put me way out of my comfort zone because I never really want to have to defend what I believe about anything, especially about my faith. But I think that's what we're being called to do today. Like the Christians who have suffered before us, we have to share our witness and begin to light the world of darkness. So this evening, my message is being presented as if you weren't the Christians that you are. So what do I say to a group of individuals who don't believe like I do? The research question posed to any group of individuals about their faith has typically been, do you believe in God? From there, the data is collected and the conversation begins, and a sad truth commences to the documented numbers of Christians today who really don't know what they believe. I begin my own answer to the question with a resounding yes. But for me, my explanation is one of simplicity that bears witness to a great magnitude of my faith and my trust. When I think about my faith, it can only be explained as simple. It's always been with me. As a matter of fact, I think it's just an extension of my being. For as long as I remember, faith has been here. As I get older, I realize that it's become something I depend upon to step forward every single day and through every single challenge that comes my way. I keep my faith in check because I don't overthink it. It's easy enough to remember where my faith began. I was surrounded by faith in my little farmhouse in Lincoln County by parents who very much believed that God lived with us. My extension of that safe place extended to my church, St. John's Lutheran, which was 2 miles west of our house. The land we farmed ran from our house to the church and surrounded it on 3 sides. That church was my everyday existence. My dad had been baptized and confirmed in that church, and my grandpa had been baptized and confirmed in the same church. The cemetery is filled with my family and a storied history of the great challenge of living during wars and a Great Depression and the dust storms that tormented their land and their souls. It never, though, took their faith. And it became my greatest inheritance. I recently decided that it was time to write my dad's story. At 91, he's battled 2 kinds of cancer and he's lived to tell the tale. His dad lived to 108 and was the second oldest man in Kansas. But I decided that my dad's story needed to be told before he couldn't tell it anymore. So when I sat down and learned all I could, much I knew, but most I didn't, I found that his childhood, even in the midst of his mother's death when she was 41 and he was just 14, was idyllic. It was work and play, and even in the midst of the Great Depression and poverty that surrounded the nation, my dad and his family were never hungry. My grandpa was conservative with his money. He saved 50 cents to every dollar he made. They raised 500 chickens a year, a few hogs, a lot of cattle, and a garden just slightly smaller than a football field. They were completely self-sufficient. My dad had a good childhood. He also had the comfort of that same church that stood just 2 miles away. It was a destination for their lives, from birth to the end of their purpose. When I asked Dad about his most memorable aspect of childhood, he said it was that church. It was the same for me. I feel blessed that I was raised in a strict schedule and commitment to God. I don't remember a time when I wasn't in Sunday school or church or catechism or youth group activities. Outside of school, it was church. My dad did that for me because his dad did that for him and his father before that. My mom had great faith too, but she always reminded me about my dad's greater faith and that it had begun in that church down the road. Mine did as well. When my mom was diagnosed with lung cancer, I was devastated, but by the time the end had come, my God had wrapped me in his comforting arms and helped me let her go. My faith has continued to remain with me and as a part of me. I guess I've taken it for granted, so to speak. Ed and I raised our boys in the church, and they loved it. I still remember the call to Salem's Board. Chase was just finishing his freshman year of high school, and Quinn his 6th grade year. They begged us to visit this church. My response, of course, was that we couldn't just church hop. We had already transferred from Christ the King in Salina to Bethany Lutheran, and I'd already felt very comfortable in and committed to every church I'd ever attended. But from the very first minute in this church, we felt something special, and the boys continued to beg for us to join. That was their continued faith in being surrounded by fellowship and God's presence, and the value they placed on church. So we joined, and I continued to be consumed with my own faith as I found my new church family with all of you. I didn't realize just how much faith surrounded me until right before Christmas, when I felt myself called to fly to Houston to attend the funeral of my cousin's 24-year-old son. Daniel was the California Golden Boy of swimming, a conference champion at Utah, and a competitor in the Olympic trials. We were told to even buy our tickets to Rio in 2016 because he would be in the Olympics that year. He fell short, though, and I guess he thought he had failed, so he graduated as an engineer, and he slowly maneuvered through life for 5 years with no purpose. On a dark day, just 3 months ago, he ended his life surrounded by a family who loved him and who will grieve his loss for the rest of their lives. The story, though, started when my cousin Scott picked me up at the airport and immediately said to me, "Sid, I need your faith." I thought my trip was one of offering comfort, and it was. But when Scott spoke, I realized that I had a new mission to tell my story about my faith. I was really surprised because I had no idea that my cousin wasn't filled with faith. In my immersion in my own life story, from our little farm in Kansas to my church and through my life, I hadn't really noticed that others, like my cousins in Tucson, didn't feel God like I did. I just assumed that most people had my faith. I didn't realize that I was supposed to share. I found that, like my cousin Scott, there are so many who haven't felt God's presence in their lives, so they didn't perpetuate that faith to their children. Scott continued to say, "I don't know how to find God." My first words back to him were as simple as I could get. "He's right here with us, Scott." From that point forward, that weekend became a call to witness to my cousin and to his family and to my cousin's siblings and to the crowd of people who filled my cousin's house on a day that will forever remain as their greatest, darkest day. But from it came the spark of hope. When I got back to Kansas a few days later, I called our wonderful Pastor Ben, and I asked him if he had any great faith-filled friends in Houston that I could use to continue to minister to Scott. And of course, Ben did. And from there, the mission to witness continues, and a life in Houston is changing. In December, my cousin Scott was one of nearly 40% of Americans who, according to research, believed that God existed, but without absolute certainty. Today, as he and his wife search for the church they can call home, they continue to look because he does believe. He has found that he needs to believe. He is still fighting for the absolute certainty, but he's on his way. My interaction with Scott was planned by God. I know it was. He doesn't want me to hide behind my humble faith anymore. He expects me to share my good news. So to an audience of believers and non-believers, I want to share my realization that faith just can't be overthought. It has to be overfelt. It's almost tangible. I can feel faith when the heat of joy and love embrace me. I can feel it when I stand up tall and face a challenge that needs to be faced. Faith doesn't mean that I don't get angry or sad or overwhelmed once in a while, but it does strip away the greatest demon of all, fear. I just don't live in fear, and I certainly don't fear death because I know from the roots of my church long ago and my mom and dad's wise words of faith that even though I love the life that I have and I get up and embrace each day on earth, death means that I will be in an even more wonderful place than where I am today. That is faith. I wanted to ask Chase and Quinn about their faith because I would feel like I hadn't done my job as a Christian mother if they had any doubt about God's presence in their lives. Quinn's very brief, Quinn-like response was this: Faith to me came from my first church, and it came from trusting the unknown. It's always with me. I just can't explain it. I just don't doubt it. Chase read me a 3-page faith statement he had written a little over a year ago. And after I cried with joy, I asked him to give me his reflection on what he had written in a few short sentences that I could share with you. Here's what he said. Through faith, I know the decisions I make, even if they don't appear to be great ones at first, will turn out to be the right decisions because of that faith. Through that faith, I have the ability to believe in something greater than myself and that there is a master plan. You can't just be half in. You have to fully immerse yourself in faith and the plan that God has made for you. With their honest words to me, I realized that my children have been given the greatest inheritance that I could ever give them, that same feeling about God that I've always had. I stand here tonight wrapped in humility, but very much filled with faith. I'm blessed to have my story and to have inherited the connection to faith, and my continued prayers that my own children will perpetuate their faith, and that the question in the near future posed to every human will no longer be, do you believe in God? But a very loud and resounding, why wouldn't you believe in God? That is what faith can do. We will continue in the Holden Evening Prayer Service on page 6. May our prayers come before you, O God, as incense, and may your presence surround and fill us, so that in union with all creation we might sing your praise and your love in our lives. Amen. The light shines in the darkness. great and merciful God, source and ground of all goodness and life, give to your people the peace that passes all understanding and the will to give your gospel of mercy and justice through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. God, remember us in your love and teach us to pray the Lord's Prayer that we typically pray on page 154 in our hymnal. Our Father, who art in heaven,